What's up, gangsters? How about a quick, hopefully, 10 minutes of technique video on stripping paint? Okay, here we go. Now, this is pretty spur of the moment and not very organized at all, so hopefully it'll go smooth. You might ask, why would I need to know the technique for stripping paint? Well, it's one of those things that you don't really need to know till you need to know it. And there's lots of discussion about it in Facebook model making groups, and it's a little bit frustrating because it seems like, a dude strips paint one time, and because whatever he uses works, then that becomes, in his opinion, the thing that will work every single time. And that is just not the case, unfortunately, especially when it comes to acrylics, because there are many types of acrylics. Well, I shouldn't say many types, many recipes for acrylics. And they don't all respond the same way to being removed. For example, probably one of the most common things that people suggest for stripping paint is oven cleaner. And I've used it or tried it. I once had a paint mule that I had covered with Tester's Model Master acrylics, and oven cleaner didn't even touch it. People also like to mention things like Simple Green, and Simple Green I think can be effective. I think both of those have a common ingredient being sodium hydroxide, which is also very useful for stripping chrome. Another thing that gets generalized a lot when in fact it doesn't always work the same. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that are real reliable for me. One of them is brake fluid. Now, I was really skeptical about brake fluid when people mentioned it. I thought, that's oil, and I don't want it anywhere near anything I'm going to paint. Well, as it turns out, it's actually a hygroscopic fluid. What does that mean? It means that it can be displaced with water, so it's very easy to wash off the residue, and as long as you don't have it trapped in any nooks and crannies, it doesn't affect your subsequent paint. Now, one thing you should be aware of is there are different grades of brake fluid. Anything that says .3 or .4, like this, that's Department of Transportation, by the way, is just fine. But if it says .5.1, absolutely do not use it under any circumstances. That is a high temperature, high performance brake fluid that's silicon based. And you don't want anything that has any traces of silicon in it anywhere near anything you're going to paint, because it will basically just ruin your day. Now, brake fluid is really effective. I've got a bunch of stuff that's been sitting in this container of it for about 5 hours now, since this morning. And these are all paint mule pieces that are covered with varying types and thicknesses of paint. This piece that I'm brushing on here in particular had a bunch of K-Colors acrylic. I think maybe, let's see, it was primed with Mr. Surfacer 1500. It has Aqua Gloss on it. It has Tester's Dull Coat on it. And as you can see, it's got some decals on it. All that's been pretty well softened by sitting here and soaking in this all afternoon. And it's going to be a disgusting mess by the time it's all done, but hey, that's just part of the deal with stripping paint. It's going to be a mess. Now, this piece, and I'm going to try and get this out of here without making too big of a mess. Already getting brake fluid all over my workbench, but hey, that's all right. It'll clean up. Anyhow, this piece that you can see here on top that's got those stripes on it, that may not come off with brake fluid. That's several different types of metallic, gravity, some others, and it's got a layer of 2K clear urethane gloss on it. And I have heard that brake fluid won't remove it. And so I just thought I'd give it a whirl and find out. But I think it's pretty clear already that it's not going to. So what I'm going to use is another standby that I have heard is effective at removing something that's been coated in 2K, and that's IPA, isopropyl alcohol. You can see I'm surprised, honestly, but this 2K clear urethane gloss doesn't seem to have been affected in the least by soaking in that brake fluid. And that doesn't surprise me. 2K clear urethane is basically a clear plastic shell that you put on your model. All right, now this next piece that's here, that had some Mr. Surfacer 1500 on it and some Tammy and maybe some dull coat, and you can see it's already nice and clean. Plenty good enough for this to go back in the mix as another paint mule. And you may wonder, why am I spending time stripping paint off of paint mule samples? Well, I've learned that paint mule samples are one of the highest value items at my workbench, and so I preserve them because, I don't want to buy new ones if I don't have to. And it's easy enough using a method like this to get these stripped off. Anyway, that's brake fluid. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this aside, hopefully without spilling it and causing some real-time on-camera comedy drama. And let's go back to the IPA, isopropyl alcohol thing. And it's pretty effective for a lot of things. I was really surprised at somebody telling me that it works for stripping off 2K urethane, because I thought, man, that stuff is so bulletproof, that could never, ever work, but it's been proven. Isopropyl alcohol is pretty strong. And some lacquers in particular are very susceptible to it, like MRP, for example. MRP has basically zero resistance to IPA, and so oftentimes you'll find that what you can do is you don't even have to soak anything. I've got some IPA in this squirt bottle here. You don't even have to soak anything. You can just put some on a little rag like this, and chances are you'll be able to just wipe it off. I'm pretty sure that the black right there that I'm rubbing on is MRP. Who knows? That's pretty old. But you can see some of that's coming off pretty easily. But this thing is covered in a bunch of layers of Vallejo metal color, which are acrylics, obviously. I think it's got some Vallejo varnish on it. This brown stuff here is Stynylrez, I believe, and it's pretty susceptible to alcohol. You can see, again, I'm able to just scrub that right off of there with this rag that's been soaked in IPA. So that can be useful, especially if what you've got is just, like, say you've painted a little bitty part like a landing gear, and something happened and you just need to get the paint off of that little piece. What I've done many times is just take a little shot glass, one of these little shot glass size medicine cups that I use for mixing paint. put some isopropyl alcohol in it, and then throw the part in there and stir it around with a paintbrush. And pretty soon, all your paint will come off. Now, here's another thing that you can use. And this is Tammy Lacquer Thinner, okay? Now, Tammy Lacquer Thinner is a relatively mild lacquer thinner. It's basically, as far as anybody knows, it's the same as Gun's Mr. Color Thinner. You could use Mr. Leveling Thinner as well, but it's expensive. You know, I prefer not to use it for things like this. I keep this Tammy Lacquer Thinner around specifically for this type of thing, because even though it's a lacquer thinner, and you can see how quickly, I mean, it instantly just removed whatever that black paint was. But it's not strong enough to damage polystyrene. So it's a fantastic stripper. I've even used it on clear parts, and as long as you're not scrubbing real vigorously, if you've got a mistake in painting your aircraft canopy frame, for example, then Tammy Lacquer Thinner can be, if you're careful and quick, can be a lifesaver. The basic rule with any of this stuff, if you're just stripping a piece where you don't have to care and you can just, scrub all over it, or throw it in a bucket of isopropyl alcohol or whatever, you don't have to worry about it then. If you have to be really careful, not to damage the part or damage some surrounding paint or whatever, then the rule is start with the weakest solvent that you've got and work your way up, so that you don't, incur any penalties that you didn't anticipate. Now you can see the acrylics that are on this mule have been on it for probably, 2 years, at least 3 years more like. And you can see that this Tammy Lacquer Thinner makes pretty short work of it. So I could, in theory anyway, I could just scrub and scrub and scrub until I got this thing completely cleaned off. I'm probably not going to do that because, after all, it is a paint mule and I don't want to commit a huge amount of labor to it. So this one is going to go in the vat of brake fluid as soon as the other stuff comes out of it. But you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All of these things can be used as paint strippers when you need them. You just have to be careful and kind of know what you're working against. Now, the one thing that I didn't cover is what if your paint is an enamel. Now, a completely cured enamel is really resistant to a lot of things. So I don't know that soaking it in IPA is necessarily going to work. You can scrub them with mineral spirits. I know guys have had good luck with that. But you have to be careful with mineral spirits because they will eventually embrittle polystyrene. And so you may find that it compromises your parts. So you just have to be careful. I would also try brake fluid. Okay, I had a small technical issue there. My camera was full right when I was almost done. Anyway, I've going back to what I was saying about getting rid of an enamel. I would also try brake fluid for that. Brake fluid is pretty powerful stuff, and again, soaking in it should loosen just about anything. Now here's an interesting thing. I can't remember what the gloss black base is that's on this mule, but I think it's an acrylic. It's been a long time, and the Tammy Lacquer Thinner is not cutting through it. Whatever it was, it's pretty good stuff, because it doesn't want to go anywhere. So hopefully the soaking in brake fluid will get rid of that. Anyway, there you go. Okay, so there you go. Now, I actually did all that a couple of weeks ago, and I made an ending originally and wrapped it up. But then, of course, like always, I had more to do or more to say or whatever. I did two things. I put this paint mule into the brake fluid, and as predicted, it stripped off all the rest of the acrylics that were all over it for the most part. However, when I did this, I had been testing some all-clad as well, and I had their gloss black base enamel, which ironically has a bad reputation for never curing, that was right here on the horizontal stabilizers, and the brake fluid didn't take it off. So that kind of proved me wrong, at least a little bit, or gave one example of something not working in the brake fluid. But I very quickly took some Tammy lacquer thinner and just wiped it off, and that took care of the rest of that. So, clean paint mule. The other thing was this thing. As I had talked about, put it in IPA because I know some guys have had good luck with IPA removing a 2K urethane. And other guys have had really good luck with brake fluid. I didn't have luck with either thing on this piece. So I ended up putting it back in the brake fluid for literally a week. And almost nothing happened. You can kind of look at it up close there, and you can see some areas, hopefully the camera's focusing, over here where it started to wrinkle up, but the only reason that it did that was because those were places where I had actually burned through the clear coat when I was doing my polish polishing. Anyway, it was thin right there, and so it wrinkled the paint a little bit, but that was all it would do. Then I thought, what the hell, I'll try some oven cleaner. That didn't do anything at all. And so this piece, yeah, probably going in the trash. But the important thing I think to note here is that this has 2K clear urethane on it that's over 2 years old. So it is well and fully cured. And it is basically, like I said, a clear plastic shell around this part. But the real point here is that, like I said at the beginning, people like to make generalities. Oh, just use this, it'll strip it in minutes. Well, yes, no, maybe. As I've shown and talked about, it kind of depends on the specific formulation of the paint involved, and at least in the case of this 2K clear urethane, may depend on the age as well. Pretty much all of the cases that I know of people successfully stripping 2K have been where it's like less than a week old, which is what you would expect because you find your mistakes or your issues pretty quickly, and at least in ideal circumstances, you're going to go ahead and get to it and take care of it. So you're not gonna have paint that's multiple years old like I did on these two things. So you have to kind of take that into account. Bottom line is always start with your mildest solvent, the one that's least likely to cause you an unforeseen penalty, and work your way up to hotter stuff as required to get the job done. So anyway, look, I hope you guys found this useful. Like I said at the beginning, it's a skill you don't know you need until you need it. And I tried to kind of show what it takes, and that a lot of generalities out there about stripping paint just don't really apply. But anyway, this video is terrible. It went way longer than 10 minutes. Like I said, totally disorganized, but like I said, hopefully you never need to know how to do this, but if you do, this will help. So anyway, I'll shut up now. Thanks for watching. Much love.